The Rival. Part 1. The first time Joe Louis beat him. The first time Joe Louis beat Chuck Norris, there was not much to say about it. It was 1966. Chuck was 26, 3 years into competition, still accumulating the losses that would eventually total 10 before the streak ended. Joe Louis was 22, had been competing for 2 years, and had the specific quality of a fighter who had arrived already formed, as though the years of training that normally produce a champion had been compressed, in Louis's case, into a shorter and more intense sequence that had not left the usual residue of rough edges. Louis hit hard and fast, and with a precision that suggested he understood not just the technique, but the physics underneath it. He was 6 feet 2 inches and built to the specifications that the sport had not yet named its ideal, but was already recognizing as exceptional. Chuck lost in the second round, not narrowly. He was dominated in the way you are dominated when you are facing someone whose development has genuinely exceeded yours at this specific moment. There was no shame in it. Louis was better that day by a margin that the scorecards recorded accurately. Chuck drove home from the tournament and trained the following morning at 5 and noted, in the training log he kept, what Louis had done that he had not been able to answer and what he intended to do about each of those things. The second time Louis beat him was 1967. 1 year later, 1 year of the specific work Chuck's log had prescribed. The result was closer, still a loss, still Louis, but the distance between them had narrowed in the way that distances narrow when one person is paying close attention and doing the work the attention prescribes. Chuck went home and trained the following morning at 5 and noted what was different and what remained the same. He did not train with Louis. He did not know Louis personally, in the sense of having had a conversation with him that extended beyond the courtesies of competitive exchange. They occupied the same tournament circuits, competed at the same events, were evaluated by the same observers and publications. They had been in each other's presence dozens of times without being, in any meaningful sense, acquainted. This is not unusual in sport at the highest level. The closest rivals are often the least personally known to each other. The knowledge runs one direction, analytical and instrumental, focused on what the opponent does and why and how to answer it, without extending into the more diffuse and less useful territory of who the opponent actually is. Chuck knew what Joe Louis did. He did not know who Joe Louis was. He was not certain, until a specific evening in 1969, that this distinction mattered. Part 2. The Bar on 5th Street. The tournament had been in Long Beach, the same venue where Chuck had won his championship the previous November, which gave the space a specific quality for him, the way places acquire qualities from what has happened in them. He had competed that day and won, which was the normal condition of his competing by 1969. Louis had competed and won, which was the normal condition of his competing at any point in his career. The bar on 5th Street was where the community went after major tournaments in Long Beach, not a martial arts bar, just the bar that was 3 blocks from the arena and had long tables and cheap beer and the kind of staff accustomed to the particular volume of a crowd of competitive people in the hours after they had finished competing. Chuck had been there before. It was loud and ordinary, and he usually stayed an hour and then drove home. He was finishing his first beer when Joe Louis appeared at the bar's far end, working through the crowd in the specific manner of a large man accustomed to being large in crowds, not aggressive, just present, moving through the space with the same efficiency of movement he brought to the floor. He ordered something from the bartender and then turned and saw Chuck across the bar and stood there for a moment with the assessing quality of someone deciding whether to act on something they've been considering. Then Louis picked up his drink and walked the length of the bar. He stopped next to Chuck. He was not a man who performed approach, he simply arrived. He put his glass on the bar and looked at Chuck with the direct and unembellished attention of someone who sees things clearly and doesn't perform the ambiguity of seeing them. "You've gotten better," he said. Chuck looked at him. "You've gotten better too," he said. "Yeah," Louis said, "but you more. You were not this good 2 years ago. He picked up his glass. I've been thinking about why. I thought it was the training. Then I thought it was the instruction who you trained with. What system? Now I think it's something else. What do you think it is? Chuck said. Lewis was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone who has been thinking about something and has not yet found the language for the conclusion. You lose differently than anyone I've competed against, he said. Most people, when they lose, they come back with adjustments, technical adjustments. They fix the specific thing that didn't work. You do that too, but there's something else you do. I can see it in how you move. You come back with a different understanding of what the fight is. Chuck was looking at him with the attention you give to someone who is saying something accurate about you that you have not yet said about yourself. What do you mean? He said. Lewis looked at his drink. Most fighters think a loss tells them what they did wrong. You seem to think it tells you what you didn't understand. Those are different things. He looked at Chuck. A technical adjustment fixes the mistake. An understanding adjustment changes the fighter. He paused. I watch people. It's a habit I've had since I started competing. The ones who are going to become genuinely great, they have that quality. You have it. The bar was loud around them. Someone was telling a story about the afternoon's semi-final match, acting it out with their hands, generating laughter from 3 tables over. The ordinary noise of the world conducting its pleasure. Why are you telling me this? Chuck said. Lewis considered the question with the same direct seriousness he had brought to everything else. Because I beat you twice, and I may not beat you again, and I want you to know that when I was beating you, I understood I was beating someone who was going to be better than me eventually, and I wanted to say that before it becomes obvious to everyone and the saying of it stops meaning anything. Part 3. The conversation that continued. They talked for 2 hours. This surprised Chuck in the way that things surprise you when you have been in the presence of someone for years without really seeing them, and then the structure of your non-seeing suddenly changes. Joe Lewis, at 25, in a bar on 5th Street in Long Beach on a Thursday evening, was not what he had been on the tournament floor. On the floor, he was exceptional and focused, and somewhat remote. The remoteness of someone whose concentration on the task at hand precluded the social surface that people carry in ordinary interactions. Off the floor, he was intelligent and direct and, in a way that Chuck had not anticipated, generous. He had been born in Knott County, North Carolina in 1944. The son of a farm family in a specific kind of American poverty that was geographically different from Chuck's Oklahoma version, but functionally similar. The poverty of rural places with limited options and the specific quality of character that such places produce in people who are determined to leave them by making something of themselves. He had been stationed in Okinawa with the Marines in 1964, and had begun studying Shorin-ryu karate there under a Japanese instructor named Eizo Shimabukuro, which had produced, in approximately 18 months of training, the foundation of what would become one of the most formidable competition careers in American martial arts history. He had returned from Okinawa with a discipline and a direction that had replaced, not suppressed, replaced the more diffuse energy of his earlier years. He competed because competition was the best available test of the practice, and the practice was what interested him, and the championship was the evidence of the practice's quality. We're not that different, Chuck said at some point in the 2 hours. No, Lewis agreed. We came from the same direction, different geography, same conditions. He looked at the table. You know what's different about you, though. Tell me. You're patient in a way I'm not, Lewis said. When I compete, I want the result quickly. I want to establish early. You're willing to wait for the right moment, even if it takes the whole match. It's a quality that doesn't look like much when you're losing, because it looks like patience means you're not pushing hard enough. But when you're winning, it's what makes you impossible. He paused. I recognized it the first time we competed, when I beat you. Even then, you were waiting. You just hadn't found yet what you were waiting for. Chuck thought about this. What were you looking for when you were beating me? What everyone looks for, Lewis said. The opening, the habit. The moment of predictability. He shook his head slightly. But you didn't give me predictability. You gave me patience, which looks like predictability until it's not. He looked at Chuck directly. The first time, the patience couldn't close fast enough. The second time, it was faster. Now, he gestured with his glass at the vague direction of the arena. I saw it today. The finish, when it came fast enough that most people in the room missed the setup. The setup was the whole match. Chuck nodded. He had not described his own approach in these terms, but recognized the description as accurate. You know what I think is actually happening, Lewis said. I think you're a better teacher than you are a fighter. Chuck looked at him. Not an insult, Lewis said quickly. The opposite. I mean that the way you understand fighting is the way a teacher understands it. From the inside out, from the principle rather than the technique. Most fighters understand techniques. You understand principles. That's rare. It means you can do something with what you know beyond just applying it yourself. You can transmit it. He paused. The teaching you're doing at your school, that's where your actual genius is. That's an interesting thing to say to someone who just beat you, Chuck said. You didn't beat me today, Lewis said, without any particular affect. We were in different weight classes. We didn't fight. No, Chuck said. We didn't. They looked at each other across the table with the particular quality of two men who have been adversaries in the specific and bounded sense of the tournament floor and who are now, in this bar on this evening, something that neither of them had a name for yet, but that felt like a more honest version of whatever they had been before. Part 4. What Lewis knew about losing. Somewhere in the second hour, Chuck asked him the question he had been carrying since the first time Lewis beat him. When you beat me, he said, the first time, did you know I would come back? Lewis was quiet for a moment. I knew you would come back, he said. I didn't know you would be unbeatable. Those are different things. What made you think I'd come back? Because you didn't fight like someone who was afraid of losing, Lewis said. You fought like someone who was disappointed by losing. There's a specific difference. Fear makes you tentative. It takes something out of you. Disappointment makes you precise. It doesn't take anything out. It adds direction. He paused. The guys who are afraid to lose, when they lose, they protect themselves from the full understanding of what happened. They construct explanations. They find the parts of the loss that aren't their fault. You didn't do that. You looked at the whole thing and took it in without filtering it. He paused again. That's how you learn faster than anyone else I've competed against. Chuck thought about this. I was afraid, he said, before every match. I'm afraid before every match. That's different from being afraid to lose, Lewis said. Fear before is about the stakes. Fear of losing is about the self. Before the match, you're afraid because the match matters. During the match, you're not protecting yourself. You're competing. Those are the conditions under which real learning is possible. Is that how you compete? Chuck said. A pause. Mostly, not always. There are times. He stopped, started again. There are matches I've won that I learned nothing from because I was too focused on winning to notice what was happening. And there are matches I've lost, not to you, to other people, where the loss was so complete that I couldn't look at it without some kind of filter. He was quiet for a moment. I'm better at this than I was. I'm not perfect at it. He looked at his glass. No one is. The bar was thinning out around them. The crowd of post-tournament people was dispersing by ones and twos to their cars and their drives home. The volume had dropped from the communal noise of 100 people to the quieter register of a dozen. Why do you compete? Chuck said. Not the official answer, the actual one. Lewis thought about it for longer than the question usually required. Because it's the hardest honest test I've found, he said. Honest in the sense that you can't fake the result. You can prepare badly and be lucky and win a match sometimes. But you can't prepare badly and be lucky for a sustained period. The tournament record is the truth about the work. I compete because I want to know the truth about the work. Chuck nodded. Same reason. I know, Lewis said. That's why I came to talk to you tonight. Part 5. The thing he said before leaving. It was past midnight when Lewis stood up to leave. He had the quality in departure of someone who had said what he came to say and was now simply completing the process of the evening. No ceremony. He picked up his jacket and looked at Chuck across the table with the direct attention he had brought to the whole conversation. There's something I want to say, he said, and I want to say it now because it's the kind of thing that gets harder to say the longer you wait. Chuck waited. The best fighters I've competed against, the ones who have genuinely tested me, there are maybe 4 or 5 of them in the whole history of my competing so far. You're one of them, not because you have the most pure physical talent, because you use what you have with more intelligence than anyone I've seen at this level. He paused. I don't know what your ceiling is. I'm not sure you do either, but I think it's higher than anyone in this sport has acknowledged, including you. Chuck looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Lewis picked up his jacket. Because you're the kind of person who needs to hear the honest version of things, not the version that flatters, the version that's accurate. He paused. The flattering version would be, you're great. The accurate version is, you're better than you know, and not knowing it is the only thing between you and what you're capable of. He paused one more time. I wanted you to know that from someone who has had to beat you to understand it. He walked out of the bar without looking back, which was his manner, which was the manner of a man who says the thing and then doesn't dilute it with the aftermath. Chuck sat at the table for a while after Lewis left. The bar was almost empty. The bartender was wiping down the far end of the counter with the tired competence of someone who has been wiping counters for a long time and has made peace with the endlessness of the task. He thought about what Lewis had said. Not the compliment. He was accustomed to compliments and had developed, over years of receiving them, a calibrated response to them that kept them from doing either the damage of inflation or the damage of dismissal. The compliment was good information received and filed. What he was thinking about was the frame Lewis had put around it. You're better than you know, and not knowing it is the only thing between you and what you're capable of. He had spent 4 years building toward a championship through a specific and disciplined process of understanding what he did not yet know, of treating each loss as information rather than verdict. The process had worked. The championship was the evidence that it had worked. But Lewis was pointing at something that the championship had not resolved, the gap between his actual capacity and his awareness of it, which was a different gap from the one he had been closing. He could close the gap between his current ability and the championship through training and competition. That gap was measurable, and the work to close it was clear. The gap Lewis was describing was different. It was the gap between who he was and who he knew himself to be, and the work to close that gap was not the kind that showed up in a training log. He drove home at 12:30. Diane was asleep. He sat in the kitchen in the dark for 20 minutes and thought about what Lewis had said and about what it would mean to be the full version of what he was capable of, and about how much of the distance between his current position and that version was a question of training and how much was a question of believing that the destination existed. He went to bed. He was up at 5. The work continued. Part 6. What came after? They competed against each other twice more after the night in the bar. Both matches were competitive in the specific way that matches between two people of genuinely comparable caliber are competitive, neither comfortable nor one-sided, going the full distance, decided by margins that a different day or a different configuration might have reversed. Chuck won the first, Lewis won the second, which was the last time Lewis beat Chuck in competition, though neither of them knew it was the last at the time. They did not socialize regularly. The bar on 5th Street was a specific occasion, not a pattern. But something had changed in the texture of their competitive relationship, something that the sports observers noticed without being able to entirely name. They competed with a quality of mutual respect that had an edge to it, the edge of two people who know what the other is actually capable of and are engaging that capacity rather than the surface performance of it. In the martial arts press in 1970, one writer described what was happening between Norris and Lewis as the most honest rivalry in American karate, meaning not that they were without competitiveness or tension, but that neither of them was performing for the other. The performance was the competition. The competition was honest. Therefore, the rivalry was honest in the specific sense of being about what it claimed to be about. Joe Louis retired from competition in the mid-1970s and became one of the most respected instructors in the American martial arts community. He taught for decades and was known among those who trained with him for a quality of directness and precision in his instruction that demanded genuine engagement rather than surface compliance. Chuck saw him occasionally at events over the years. They spoke with the particular ease of people who have established a baseline understanding early and have never had reason to revise it. There was no drama in their subsequent history, no conflict, no public disagreement, nothing that made news. Just two men who had competed honestly against each other and had known it and had said so once in a bar on 5th Street in Long Beach on a Thursday evening in 1969, when both of them were still in the part of their careers where the best things were ahead of them and neither of them knew exactly what form those best things would take. What Chuck kept from that night, what he carried forward as an operational piece of information rather than a memory, was the frame Lewis had put around the compliment. Not knowing is the only thing between you and what you're capable of. He applied this to his training, which was already rigorous, and became more honest, less about the performance of preparation and more about the actual gaps, the things he genuinely did not yet understand. He applied it to his teaching, where the principle had its clearest expression. A student who does not know what they don't know cannot learn what they need to learn because they do not know what to bring to the learning. He applied it, over years, to every part of his work and his life that he was willing to examine honestly. It did not always produce comfortable conclusions, but it produced accurate ones, and accurate was what he had always needed more than comfortable. Joe Louis had beaten him twice. Then he had sat in a bar and told him the truth. Chuck Norris had never found a reason to disagree with either conclusion. Epilogue, the unwritten chapter, in the recorded history of American karate's development in the 1960s and 1970s, the story of its competitive landscape is usually told through the names on the records, the championships, the wins, the undefeated streaks, the titles held. These are the legible facts, the things that fit in the sentence. X won, Y held the title for Z years. What the records cannot hold is the conversation in the bar on 5th Street. It has no place in the official account because it is not an official event. It is two men talking for 2 hours on a Thursday evening, saying the true things about each other and about the practice they share, things that would not appear in any publication and that both of them would spend years applying in their own ways. The conversation changed Chuck Norris in a way that his subsequent career reflects, but cannot be entirely explained by. The shift in the quality of his competitive and teaching work in the years after 1969, the deepening of what Lewis had already identified as the distinguishing principle, the closing of the gap between his capacity and his awareness of it. This is the evidence of the conversation, but the conversation itself, and what was said in it, and the specific quality of what it meant to have an opponent look at you across a bar table and tell you the accurate version of what you were. This remained for a long time a private piece of the history. The unwritten chapter is often the most important one. The one that doesn't appear in the record is the one that makes the record make sense. Chuck Norris was never beaten by Joe Louis again after 1969, but Joe Louis remained, in the most useful sense, the opponent who changed him, not by the beatings, which were information, but by the conversation that followed them, which was something more.